Bang. I'm Ajay Johan, your host for this session, and thank you for tuning in. That said, if you guys want to contribute to our topics, have any questions, or just want to tell us what an amazing job we are doing, you can reach out to us at 6364252164. Now let's jump right into it. For today's topic, we have work life balance and work stress. And of course, we have Johan here with us again. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Yohann.
So, for this edition of the Reality Bank, Joan and I will be having a discussion regarding this very important topic, and we'll give you guys our viewpoint about this. So, my very first question to Joan is going to be, now, how do you personally define work pressure, and at what point do you think does the work pressure become too much?
It's how to define it. I can define it. It's like it's like a game for me. Like it's like when you start playing a game. Yeah, when you're on the entry level, when you just start playing the game, you're very
Mhm.
excited, you're very motivated, and it's fun for you. And your mind is for your mind is set in a right tone that you are enjoying the whole game. But once
Yeah,
the levels get harder, once there are more obstacles in the game, once it gets once it reaches to a point where you're playing the level again and again and again, and you have your aim is not for enjoying, but your aim is to complete that level at that point. And
yeah,
and I think that's really how I would define work pressure. When the moment where you are enjoying the game, but the moment the game starts controlling you, that's the way I would like to, and uh, to link work pressure to set like an example. Because here's the thing
hmm,
about work pressure, right? Like work pressure is a combination of deadlines, responsibilities, and expectations. If you boil
yeah,
it down, these are the three things. And don't get me wrong, these are very good, these are good to push yourself, and to push your own talent, and it's supposed to bring out, it should bring out your best. But the
yeah,
moment but these demands, when they outweigh the resource that's available, right? When I say resource available, I'm talking about insufficient time, I'm talking about an unsupportive environment, I'm talking
yeah,
about not having a clear workload given to them, not a clear expectations given to them, and it's very unbalanced for them. And there's a physical and mental strain. When it reaches that point, I think that's when work pressure ends up becoming like a double-edged sword. The reason
yeah,
like the reason why there is some sort of a system over there is so that work can be done. But sometimes, because I feel like there is the communication sometimes may not be good enough, that so sometimes they will extend the work hours, and they want to finish the deadlines, and that so they'll end up forgetting about the well-being of the employee, and they have only
yeah,
one aim, that is to complete the deadline. And I think when you're in such sort of a, I think especially in a corporate field, it's so competitive, right? And when it's so competitive, I think sometimes they even forget about uh, taking care of about the person's well-being. I know they have one aim, that is to complete the deadline, and for that they will take how many ever risks they want. And the thing is, the balance between work life and personal life, I feel like when it starts when the pressure starts to when it starts to hinder your personal life and your work life, when it starts to affect your well-being, when it starts to hinder your creativity instead of enhancing it, I think that's where work pressure is seen. That's where work pressure starts for for a person. And the sad part in many of these situations is a lot of times, it's also for some people, it's like an inner kind of a pressure, right? They want to achieve the goal themselves. That is, which is why, like, that's the difference between hustling and work pressure, right? The difference in
yeah,
hustle is, it's all about, hustling is about the mindset, hustling is goal oriented, hustling is achieving. And for that, they will reach, they will take how many ever hours they want, they will work overnight. But work pressure is very different. They are physically and mentally, they're drained out. I'm not telling, even when you're hustling and you're working for hours, that also mentally strains you out. But the mindset is very different. It's your
yeah,
own, your own boss. When you're hustling, you're the one who is putting yourself through those many hours, which will affect your health in some way or the other. But you have the freedom of not taking a break, taking a gap off, taking a rest. You have that freedom. when you're
Yeah,
working in a corporate and you don't have that sort of a freedom. And
exactly.
unfortunately it reaches to a point where some of them don't even have a choice. I think
Yeah,
that, like, these kind of, it's almost like, you're surrounded by four walls and you can't open the door and get out unless you can finish this deadline. That's
yeah.
really how work pressure would I would define.
Yeah, so coming from a work pressured environment, like I've gone through a lot of jobs, I've gone through a lot of corporates, like
Mm,
where there's a lot of work pressure. So coming from that itself, like if you ask me to define work pressure, so normally they give you a task, okay, and you're supposed to do this
mm,
task in a specific amount of time. Now
mm,
the pressure is they want you to do that task. Say they give you a week's time, they want you to finish it
mm,
in 3 days. Now that is that work pressure, because
mm,
various managers of various departments, they give a certain target to the main CEO,
mm,
and CEO will be like, okay, if you can achieve this target as well as get a little bit more, you will get a certain incentive. And the thing is, like, the money here, like, the money controls them basically, because it's not
mm.
any small amount. We are talking about massive amounts. We are talking about
Yeah.
thousands, tens of thousands of rupees.
Mm,
And so say if a person, like, say if a CEO gives, like, okay, hey, you're supposed to do 100 sales in this particular week, and the person says, like,
mm,
no, I'll do 150. Then the CEO says,
mm,
okay, you do 150, I'll give you like maybe 25,000, or maybe 15 to 25,000 is usually the price range they usually keep for this. If you do this many, I'll give you that much. And
mm,
nobody's benefiting here. It's just only the manager is benefiting. The employees are
mm.
totally worked to the bone, and of course that causes a lot of stress, a lot of strain, a lot of stress. It affects the
Mm.
health of the employees, and that's why you see many people who are leaving jobs very quickly, because they're not able
Yeah.
to find that certain level.
Mm.
And regarding the point of where work pressure becomes too much is, see, once or twice work pressure is okay. It's not going to affect your health anytime.
Yeah.
But if it continuously happens in a constant thing, like, as I said, a week, you have a week to complete a task. He wants you to complete it in three. Fine.
Yeah.
First time is okay. Second time is okay. But if it keeps happening, it's going to really affect your health. And that's, of course, when you have to find something that,
Mm.
is more suitable to you, because ultimately it's your health. You have to,
Yeah.
look after your own health. Nobody's going to do that for you. And
Yeah.
you have your life ahead of you. So that's it.
But
So,
you can't blame also, right? Sometimes I feel like that's how the system, corporate system, has been developed in such a way. It's
yeah,
like, the higher the every position who are higher, they have their own workload of pressures. And sometimes when they're
exactly.
in their own workload of pressure, I think sometimes they end up forgetting the other people, how it's mentally straining them.
Yeah, so that's something that should be changed, and special rules need to be adapted for that. Because right now, if you take a look at the current generation, of course, we have a lot more work, a lot more load compared to the previous generation, and of course, we are expected to do a lot more, because we come
Hmm.
from this certain generation which are said
Yeah.
to be brain children for some reason.
Yeah.
So, moving on to the next question now, how does excessive work pressure affect employees' mental health? And what are the long term impacts on productivity and innovation?
Hmm. It I mean, what, no matter what, like how much of I think, working for extensive amount of hours, like you said, right, once or twice, okay, fine, but when it happens multiple amount of times, that's when it will start mentally affecting. That is so true,
Yeah,
right? And that's where, I think that's where the moment there is so much workload on you, I think that also, for people, I think it will, make their anxiety a lot worse, when there is when you have certain deadlines, when you have so much amount of works, and you have so many, like, working hours, so many hours that has been there's a limited, like, amount of hours, also insufficient time has been there. So at
yeah,
this time, I think, the moment there's so much pressure on that person, it's going to make them very anxious. It's going to, mentally they may not be in a fresh enough space for them to work as well, right? And which is what leads to burnout, I feel. Like, I think one of the main reasons people get a burnout a lot has to do with, is, it's like a mental stress, comes out because of the work pressure. And it's very that's why a lot of them a lot of the reasons why people end up resigning, people end up leaving jobs, is because of, how imbalanced the timings are, how, like,
yeah,
sometimes they'll have to work for like 16, 17 hours, a day, and then the next day it's very repetitive as well. I know so many of my friends itself who had to work for hours and hours and hours. Like they were getting good pay, but then for the amount of hours they had to work, it was mentally very straining for them. And it also will physically it's also physically very straining also, right? I mean, because of
Yeah.
we saw what happened in the recent incident in EY, right? She passed away due to cardiac arrest,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and it was due to the work overload, that physically, mentally, that it strained out for her, and that was the reason she ended up. Unfortunately, she passed away due to cardiac arrest, and I think that impacts your the moment the office tells you to work for so many amount of hours. It also blurs your your work life balance, I feel. Yeah, like
Yeah.
if you work for so many amount of hours, you don't end up that your your personal life will be so imbalanced to your work life. And sometimes because your personal life is imbalanced, getting back to balance that personal life out, from such sort of a work pressure, it's also very difficult for people. Because it's almost like the work pressure, unfortunately, it's almost like a loop. So people end up, it's very hard to get out of that loop for them to adjust, balance their work life with their personal life, unless they find a place which is a lot better for them overall, which has a better balance. And I think the another sad thing about a lot of these work pressure is it isolates the person, and it really their social life sometimes reduces a lot due to these many amount of hours. Like we know people, like who they'll have to, if they're meeting their friends, due to late night work they'll have to cancel, and if they have to work till night 10, 11 in a place, they if this keeps happening regularly for them, they their social life gets it gets very condensed towards the end. And I think that also mentally affects them. I think one of the things is, when it comes to like work pressure, I think one of the things that people should be doing is have a good social life, so that your work life and your personal life does get balanced. Otherwise there'll be so much imbalance, it's also going to affect their material, their work also. It's going to affect the material. I remember like one of my college seniors, he was a musician as well like me, and he told, in the end of the day, the chemistry between the bandmates is very important, because that chemistry between the bandmates will also affect the material of the music. Similar to that, I think if that mental health of the person is if they're not in a fresh enough space, I think it also bringing weak result of their work also. The productivity does reduce in that way.
Yeah. So you just spoke about the recent EY incident. So now, in this specific incident, Anna's mother, she mentioned that nobody from the company attended her funeral. Now, what exactly does this say about corporate culture, and how can organizations foster a more compassionate and human centered approach for this particular thing?
It's I think that was like the saddest thing when I read through the when I was reading about the news. I think that was the saddest thing when I read nobody from her office went for a funeral. That's a very sad news to hear, right? I mean, yeah, like she worked, just although she worked for a few months, she still,
Yeah.
it's 4 months is long enough to have had good number of people that she would have known. But still, I think sometimes as also in a country like India, where there are so many people, right? It's like a rat race in
Yeah.
India. So it's so much more competitive, I think, in India. Because of that, sometimes I feel like there's lack of empathy over here, and that lack of empathy, is above, the productivity and profit, that is put above even lack of empathy towards the people. And I think just like every other person, they have so much of workload, for those 8 hours. They want their life outside the office as well.
Yeah.
And I think I think due to that, I think communicating with the office members, I think creating some sort of a social life within their own peers, I think is something, if they don't focus on, uh, it'll be very difficult. Because see, every day you're going to spend, after you start working major more than your friends outside of work, you're going to spend most of your time with your peer, with your colleagues. So I think it is very important to, to create a good, friendship, a good circle, with your with your friends as well. And I think it's very important to communicate with your employees as well. I think the and also like cultivating like a supportive environment. I think once I think they that plays a huge role. If there is not a good, if the environment itself is very toxic, I think that will affect the work also. So
Yeah.
I think if there is a good supportive environment created by the leaders itself, if they know to if they know to be a good leader and create such sort of an atmosphere for the people, despite the workload, I think it will end up enhancing the result of the work as well. And I feel like if there are policies to support work life balance. When I say policies, I'm talking about like having a fixed number of hours. Like Shashi Tharoor was telling, like like they should make like 40 hours work thing mandatory or something. He was telling something about that after hearing this
Yeah.
incident, because there is because Narayana Murthy, the Infosys owner, he was very vocal about telling you have to work 70 hours a week. He's but
Hmm.
the thing about that is he's not wrong about that. If you want, only if you end up working for 70 hours a week, only if you hustle for that many hours, you'll actually end up getting like. But the thing is like the person takes if the person is taking the decision of working 70 hours a week versus someone is forcing you to work 70 hours a week, that's two different things.
Yeah.
When you have not taken the decision to work for 70 hours, I think that's where it becomes mentally straining for the person. But if you yourself are ready to take that whole risk of cutting off your it will reduce your social life, it will affect your personal life a lot. Your time spending time with people also will reduce a lot if you end up doing that. But that hard the push to drive, I think that's what will bring the result. But still, I think when you end up working in a corporate, it's unfair to make you have that sort of an hustle. I think it's unfair to make someone else also do the same thing you're doing. So I think
Exactly.
creating some sort of a support work life policy is important. And there's not just in work. I think in general people really underestimate the importance of mental health, right? In India, and we have
Yeah.
seen a lot of it happen, and we have seen how people have not really spoken or been very vocal about mental health. And we have seen a lot of instances as well. I was seeing this one documentary where this one of this person, he had committed a certain crime. It's a very brutal crime whatever happened, but when they were doing the documentary, they were telling if this guy would have actually opened up and spoken to someone, it he would have maybe he wouldn't have gone to that extent of committing the crime. And that's when there was a psychologist in the documentary who was telling the importance of mental health is so underestimated in this country, that it will lead to such sort of results like this. And unfortunately, I think in corporates, it's very sad that sometimes I think some sort of a checkup, some sort of a mental health checkup would be done. I think it will be very great, and it will be very helpful for people as well. So the problems with such sort of a work for such sort of a work life balances, uh, yeah, these kind of things are not concerned when productivity and when profit is when work is and deadlines, and when these are the things that are put above a person's well-being. And I think that also will end up affecting how the way they communicate with the person, because the workload that they're giving to this person, the workload itself is so much. How will they end up communicating with another person? So I think some
Yeah.
creating that sort of an environment is very important.
Of course. Now, moving on. Now, work from home has become very, very popular with all sorts of companies like Amazon, Flipkart,
Yeah.
Misha, all of that. So now, do you think working from home has an increase or decrease in work pressure for most people, and why exactly?
It's a yes and no. I feel when it comes to work from home. I mean, as much as advantages work from home has, it also has its advantages. I mean, since you also work from home, I think you also will have something to say about this. But like I ended up doing my internship in one place. But the advantage for like the one thing about the one thing about work from home is that a lot of people will not understand it. It blurs out, the work life and your personal life boundary to a whole different level. Like they don't, when you're working from home, even I think it's like the pressure is also increased so much. The expectation has increased
Yeah,
so much that you have to constantly keep checking the mail. You have to constantly keep checking what they
exactly.
have put told you. And I had to check my mail every single time. I had to check my WhatsApp messages every time. Sometimes at 10 they would like send me messages, and they would like, there's this poster you have to design. You have to design all of it. But the advantage for me in that this was, they didn't immediately expect me on that night itself to do the poster. They would send me the message, but the next day, like I'll tell them I'll send it by tomorrow afternoon. So tomorrow, the next day, I'll wake up in my regular time and I'll start working and I'll finish the work and I'll give it to them. So that's
Yeah,
sort of a, although they were giving me the work late at night, still at least there was some sort of a system where they were like, they understood that I don't have to, he doesn't have to sit and work at night. Let him finish, give it tomorrow afternoon itself. So that's
yeah,
sort of a positive environment was created for me in that internship, which is why I think it was fine for me. Like it didn't bother me. Like, but I know a lot of people, who will get work at like at 7 at 8, and they will still have to do, and the problem is that they'll have to immediately finish the work as well. I think
yeah,
the level of expectations is a lot higher. I feel like when you're working from home, there's constantly, you'll have to be in front of your laptop. That will strain you out a lot as well, I think. And I think I think more than anything, I think the worst thing about work from home is, previously, just before this, the question you asked me about, how nobody came for her funeral, right? I mean, when you're working in a corporate, when she worked in a corporate, and she didn't have enough of friendship among her colleagues. Work from home, you will not have association with any of your colleagues.
exactly. Yeah,
You will not end up, there's so much lack of support, that you don't have, your employees, all your colleagues, probably you might text them for work related in WhatsApp, but other than that, there is not sort of a friendship, that is a bond that is created. So in
yeah,
the end of the day, when you're work from home, in the end of the day, it's just you and the laptop. Your laptop is
yeah,
your friend, when you're working from home. And there is so much, also I think work from home is so much more distractive, I think, compared to from a corporate life. We have
true.
so many things that can distract you when you're sitting at home. And also, like, because there's so much of flexibility, I think you will feel like you can do this, you can do that, and these sort of distractions will come as well. But I think the biggest advantage of work from home is flexibility. I
Yeah,
think that is the biggest blessing I think work from home has given, that you can, the feeling of waking up in the morning whenever you want, when you're going and working in an office, you will have to wake up by 6:30, and then you
yeah,
have to leave home by 7:30, 8 or something. Some people
yeah,
have to leave home by 5 and 6. In college I knew that some people like that who had to leave so early. So I think when you're working from home, you don't have that that transportation, that sorry, traveling problem will be completely gone, especially in a city like Bangalore, where it takes hours and hours to travel. I think work from home will be such an advantage for every single person. And
yeah,
it's a very comfortable environment that work from home will have. I think work from home is something, it's the best thing if there is a good structure created in the company, where they will also make you work from, let's say, 9 to 5:30. If they're telling you to work for only for these many number of hours, and then I think work from home is amazing to, like, balance your personal life and your work life. I think work from home will do that so well. But I think if anyone is working from home, best is to have a very good social life. Otherwise, if you're just going to work from home, and after work you're just going to sit at home, so being just surrounded in your room the whole time, and mentally also strain you a lot. So I
yeah.
think it's very important to have a social life when you're working from home. You work from home, right? So what do you have anything to say about this?
So I actually had a hybrid kind of a thing. So I'll be very honest. When I got told to work from home, I never really worked actually. So I used to finish my entire day's work like within the first 3 4 hours, and
Oh, nice.
and I only used to post the results at the end of every hour. Like, I'm not about the entire results. I used to post like maybe maybe 10 and then another 10 and then another
Mm.
10, so they'll think, okay, fine, I'm I'm working, but in reality everything was done in the first 3 to 4 hours, and the rest of the time just whiling away my time.
That's what I meant by flexibility, right? Work. I think work from home has that sort of a flexibility.
Exactly, but it also makes you lazy in a way, because
Mm.
like like honestly speaking, the work from home thing, like only the first 3 4 hours I was actually very active. Then the remaining around 4 to 5 hours I was extremely lazy. But I never took naps. I can't really take naps. Just imagine if I get a
Yeah.
call and if I'm not answering that call, oh
Oh
god, there's
no.
going to be consequences. And yeah, you do not
Yeah.
want to be the receiver of those consequences, or if any
Yeah.
meetings are there, you have to really attend it. So
Yeah.
I feel working from the office is a lot better, because
Yeah.
depending on your profession, like what you do, so you
Mm.
only given a task from this time you come into work to the time you leave from work, and they are
Mm.
not supposed to give you anything after that. Now working
Mm.
from home, they can give you at any single point of time,
Mhm.
because I
Yeah.
remember, yeah, I remember my work timing was like 10:30 to around 7 or something, and I got
Mm.
tasked like what almost like 8:15, 8:30, and I was not even at home. I literally went to a friend's place at that point of time, and he
Mm.
wanted me to complete in the next hour. I was like, but my work timing is over and all of that. He's like, no, you have to complete it, very important, tomorrow there's a meeting, la, la, la. Yeah, but that's the entire issue of working from home, I feel, because they don't really, think like the employees have their own personal life. They think, okay, fine, they're working from home, they don't have to travel, all of that, they don't have any life except work. That's the kind of thing,
Mm.
like, you have to be very careful about. So that's why I prefer, like, working in the office is a lot better,
Mm.
and at least you have that connection to your work. But when you're working
Mm.
from home, it's like, okay, fine, it's just back to COVID again. We are attending online classes,
Mm.
and we are doing our various essays and all kinds of
Yeah.
assignments. So there's really not any discrimination from college to work right now. That's the whole
Yeah.
point.
Mm.
So moving on to the last question now, considering what happened, it was a very tragic outcome in the EY incident. Now, what
Yeah.
measures can companies take or implement to ensure, the well-being of employees, especially under work and when they have tight work deadlines?
I think in the previous few questions itself, I think I already spoke about some things that that they can do. But I think
Yeah,
one thing is like I think enforcing work boundaries is something so important because like the moment they don't do that, the moment they forget that they also have a personal, they have a life outside work as well. But I think for sometimes when you're in a space where you're sitting and you have to finish the deadlines, I think
yeah,
people end up forgetting that the people also who are working in the other places, they are also having to work because of something that they are expecting to do. And because unfortunately I think because of poor communication sometimes, I think the deadlines will increase, the number of hours will increase, and the
yeah,
workload will increase, and the pressure ends up increasing. So I think if they enforce some sort of like a work boundaries, if there is good communication between the with the employee and the leaders, I feel like if the goals are told, if the goals are communicated very well, the workload is distributed very well, correctly for them within these many hours. If they should understand that this is they should understand this person, that this is a human being, right? So within these
exactly.
8 hours, according to these 8 hours that the person is going to work in a day, according to those 8 hours, I think if they distribute the workload to them in such a way that within the deadline they can finish the work, and they have finished the work within the number of hours that they work. I
Yeah,
think this sort of a very good well structure, I think will be very helpful.
yeah,
Also, I feel like I remember Narayana Murthy also telling this in some interview where he's like they should cut lunch and breaks in corporate offices. He was telling something like that. If we cut that, you will have enough time to work as well. But like imagine just sitting in one place and working for 8 hours without moving. It's very
yeah. It's
it's
not
going to be very
happening.
it's going to be very bad, right? And I
Yeah,
think people who work from home, I think that is also a very big disadvantage for them.
yeah,
Like they can take the breaks, but sometimes because of it's very uncertain when they'll send you the mail, when they'll not
exactly.
send you the messages that that if you take the break and then like 10 minutes ago later you come back and see 10 minutes ago that they have sent the mail or message and you haven't responded, and they'll also expect you to respond very quickly, right? So I
Yeah.
think these sort of breaks is, these mandatory breaks is so important, which they do in many places. But I feel like sometimes when the work pressure is increased, sometimes people will, end up working those breaks as well. So I think
Yeah.
these mandatory breaks is very important to keep yourself mentally fresh, I think. And I've said earlier, the importance of mental health, like how people do not give enough importance to mental health, that the result that it ends up taking it to, people end up getting burnouts, people end up disliking the professions, people end up leaving the jobs, and you employ a person so that they work in this place for you for a long time, right? You don't want the person to leave within 6 months. If you
Yeah.
want that to happen, I think you have to focus on that person's well-being as well. You have to understand that person is a human. If that person is willing to hustle for 16 hours, that's a different thing. But you telling that person to work for 16 hours, that will mentally strain that person, because when like I said, you are not the person can, if the person is controlling how many hours they are working, that's different from someone else telling you to work for. So
Yeah.
I think the importance of mental health is very it's very important. And also creating a good, healthy and a happy, like an environment and atmosphere, will bring out the best result also, I feel
Yeah.
like you will really get out the best result when the atmosphere is set in such a place, in such sort of way. And I think the ones who are leaders of the of the department, or of whichever teams, I think they if they have their leadership skills, have that sort of if they have that sort of a skill to create that sort of an environment for the person, that 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 will end up bringing the best output as well. So I think the person who's like the leader of the team, I think their leadership skill also ends up mattering in this whole work pressure. I think if they also have good skills of telling this person to do work in for these many hours, this much work you have to do, and they also know to set the right sort of an atmosphere for that person, to bring out that sort of a result. I think that sort of leadership skills is something that'll be very helpful. So yeah,
Yeah.
great atmosphere is also one of the best things.
Yeah. So, with that being said, that officially brings us to the end of today's show. A huge thank you to Johan for joining today's show and, of course, imparting your valuable input.
Thank you for having me, Johan.
Thank you so much. And remember, guys, we air on Mondays at 4:30 p.m. That's it. If you guys want to contribute our topics, have any questions, or just want to tell us what an amazing job we are doing, you can reach out to us at 6364252164. And a huge thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this edition of the Reality Bang, your weekly dose of your power, brought to you by FEBA Online. This is RJ Johan. Hope you have an amazing